This is Tamara.
Good afternoon, Tamara. How are you? It's Susan Bird.
I am okay. How are you?
I'm great. Did you get my note in response to your memo thing? Did you get
Yeah,
that? Oh, great. Does that work for you? I mean, I think that's kind of what you had in mind, but I just wanted to
yeah.
make sure. Okay. And by the way, I re-listened to most of the earlier conversation that we had, and some of it is really good. So
Okay.
you'll see that I think we'll have some pretty good stuff, and I think you're trying to make some new points here. So
Yeah.
let's make sure we
I
do that.
I agree. I think some of it is just, as I'd said to Sadie and Bree, I'm normally more prepped than I felt we were. So I have no problem, with doing these things and being quoted, but I'd just like to make sure that we do cover things that,
You want to
matter.
get said. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. What's important though is that it not sound like a pitch. So I think
No,
we
agreed.
can work around that because you're pretty good at this extemporaneous stuff. Okay, so um, let me start then by what did I say? Did I print that one out? What I didn't do was print out the note I just sent you. So if you give me a second, let me just do
No
that.
problem.
Have everything else here, but I forgot that one. Yeah, hold on a second. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm just going to pull this off the printer. Just a minute.
No problem.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's just get started. So, Tamra, um, in today's world, it seems that there really are some who feel that it's terrifically important for organizations, whether they're for profit or not for profit, to be based on some set of values that are understood to be somehow good in terms of their social impact. So, my first question of you would be, how do you define a values driven organization?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think there are probably lots of really good answers to that in the context of, every organization will tell you it has core values. But I also think that every organization will probably really be talking about some of those sort of permission to play values, the thing that really gets them in the door, that we take for granted, that we expect, rather than the kinds of values that are, really driving their purpose as an organization. But I do think the values matter. And I think they matter not just to your employees and to engaging with your staff, but they matter to your client base, your customers. And I suppose in a law firm context, that's always been pretty hard to define. But we've recently been given probably one of the most interesting pieces of evidence that values matter for a law firm, in that last week a client took a very public stand against a law firm around values. And that client was Wallace Global Fund. They're a nonprofit investment vehicle, and they are dedicated to fighting injustice and promoting diversity, which sounds like that might make them quite small or quite irrelevant, but in reality, in this world of ESG-driven investment, impact investment, et cetera, it's becoming an increasingly important component of every asset manager's thinking. They fired their lawyers. They wrote a letter to the chair of Morgan Lewis, and expressed their profound disagreement with the advice that had been given by Morgan Lewis to President Trump, which they said was not just simplistic and ill-founded, but also offered a, quote, unprecedented invitation to corruption.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. And they interestingly opened their letter by basically addressing McKeon as a fellow law school alumni.
And McKeon is whom? He's the chair?
McKeon is the chair of Morgan Lewis.
Okay.
And they evoke these sort of elements of commonality in the context of values and underscoring their sort of sense of betrayal of those values by referring to them as having this common law school alumni. They were clear that they thought the law firm attorneys who had worked for them, i.e. for the Wallace Global Fund, had done a good job, but they still thought that it was important to convey their decision to the firm's leadership and to invite the firm to, quote, think about larger principles than simple zealous representation of a client.
So, Tamara, is this the first time that you've heard of where a client has actually fired a law firm over a values issue?
It's certainly the first time I've seen anything quite so public, and the first time I've seen it be really over a values as opposed to, perhaps a corruption or a malpractice or a negligence or, sort of an issue that is perhaps harder, less difficult to qualify and quantify than this concept of values. And so, again, I think it's probably hard to know. They're a small client, I'm sure, of this firm. It's a big firm. But I think it does, really raise this question that we all have to ask ourselves, particularly because one of our core values, every law firm, every professional services firm, and probably most customer-facing entities out there will tell you a core value will be something like client service. And I think we have to ask ourselves, are we really serious about those core values when our clients are clearly finding that, that values do matter to them and our shared values matter to them?
This is fascinating. So there's another question I wanted to ask you, and that is, assuming that we all say this is the way we want to live and work, is there any evidence that you know of that values-driven organizations are actually more profitable than others?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think when we look at, lots of issues around what I'd go back to sort of ESG, this sort of ethics, sustainability, governance type questions that a lot of investors are really focused on, that are causing them, for example, to, vote against remuneration packages for management, that are causing them to vote against all male boards, those sorts of things. We look at some of the things around gender or diversity and say we can prove the positive correlation between diversity, gender balance, and, say, return on equity. There's lots of great evidence out there of that. I don't know that we have the same evidence, although clearly some of the impact investors might profess to have it, and I just haven't seen it, around values in that positive correlation. But what I think I can tell you is that there's a negative correlation. So, witness obviously this issue with the Wallace Global Fund and Morgan Lewis, witness VW and the issues that they are having, not just because they've been fined, but clearly there is a significant impact around the way in which they went about designing their emissions tests and what it means. But more critically, and I think very recently, we're now starting to see the negative impact on Fox News of the O'Reilly sexual harassment settlements and the pulling of ads from Fox by advertisers that are saying, by having those cases settled, by our knowing that you have continued to employ someone like O'Reilly, whose values we don't share, we now don't believe we can have advertising with you. So that negative correlation, i.e. that a lack of shared values can cost you money, I think must be in evidence.
This is terrific. So let's talk about another group of people that seem to be very interested in this issue, and that is the people that companies hire, including yours, and that is the millennials who in the past in the recent past certainly seemed bent on finding out what are the pro bono things that your law firm does, what are the charities in which your corporation to which your corporation gives money. But now it seems to have gone beyond that to really the basic core values of the company or the firm and how they would live within that milieu. Do you see that happening, and is that something that you really design things around? Are you responsive to that in a way that you think really has some teeth in it?
I do see that happening, and I've alluded to one of the areas that I think we see it most, kind of clearly come up with our new hires, our trainees, as we bring people, our summer associates, as we bring people into the firm, and that really is around inclusion and being an inclusive workplace. That's not something you can fake very easily, and frankly, even if you could, the millennials are pretty wise to that. They're not going to be fooled by your parading, some ethnic minority and female lawyers in front of them, and then when they get there, it turns out that was it. So they really do their diligence. They look on your website. They ask for the statistics about your inclusion, how you deal with the LGBTQ community. What are you doing with respect to disability? Those things actually matter to the millennials, to frankly, a number of our employee bases. And so I think we all have to think harder about how we show that shared value. And then more importantly, it matters hugely to our clients now. So I'm asked those same questions with almost every RFP that I fill out for our clients, around what are we doing, how are we dealing, with an inclusive workforce? What's our percentage of female partners? What's our percentage of ethnic minority? What do we know about our LGBTQ community? What are we doing otherwise in inclusion? Those are hard and important questions, that we see on RFPs. But I think equally critically for millennials, it's not just the inclusion, it's also some of the questions around innovation. What kind of place are you? Are you a kind of backward-looking, traditional, workforce that expects, certain behaviors, or are you, a workplace that promotes, again, an innovative, maybe a differently oriented working environment? Do you like and expect to get new ideas? Are you asking your employees to be engaged fully? Or do you expect them to sit at their desks and stare at their computers? And, those are the kinds of values, if you will, that I think, I see our millennial employees and prospective employees looking to us and frankly asking some very tough questions about.
Well, one of the questions that often gets asked is around this issue is it's really great to say that you want people to be innovative, but how do you reward people who are innovative but something doesn't work? In fact, it fails.
Right. Right.
What happens then? Do you have a thought around that?
Well, I do. And again, I think a lot of firms have figured out the sort of failure language, the permission to fail being, again, really good, good watchwords and great things to be able to talk about, as part of your culture, that, it is a place where you can fail. In reality, I think, it's fair to say that in a professional services environment where we tend to sell our time, it's very difficult to figure out, how do you acknowledge that sometimes we will fail? One of the ways we do that is to say, we're going to accept and agree that we will do things on different fee bases so that we can take chances. Sometimes we'll do contingency work, for example, or we'll, agree an uplift only if we succeed, or we'll agree an abort fee if it doesn't work, those kinds of things. And those are sometimes driven by the client demand, but sometimes driven by our desire to be different. And, that makes a difference in that context. But I will be honest and say I don't think most professional services firms and certainly law firms are really, fully embracing that sort of ability to fail, indeed, that concept of innovation, because our business model is quite an inhibitor to that. And we're all working on how to change that, but with a billable hour business model, a selling of time, and therefore our value is based on our time, it becomes really hard to be terribly innovative and still incorporate that bit of your business model.
So one last question I have is, it seems as if right now this values question has gotten more heated, more important than ever before, which is ironic in that there are some people who are disheartened by a lot of things they see around themselves, not just locally but globally, around values, whether it matters at all to be a principled person. So,
right.
And maybe the two are actually intersecting. Do you have a thought about that? Are we saying do values matter now, maybe more than ever? What's your thought?
I do think they matter now more than ever, and I think maybe our kind of political climate perhaps drives some of that. I think this setting an example matters. Being able to say to your new and young employees that this is the kind of culture we have. Respect for these values is really critical, and actually that we're prepared as an organization to be true to those values, to follow through, and even frankly, if that's at odds sometimes with our pocketbooks, still firmly stick to those values. And that I think is actually what certainly what a lot of our talent, but also a lot of our clients, our customers, those who want to find that reason for engaging with us. They need to know, why you over another law firm. And the reality is, on pure sort of metrics, capability, lots of those things, we will look just like everyone else. What really will bring us together is that shared sense of community, values, what's important, which hopefully will include, reaching an objective or a result together, but doing so in a way that we each trust will align with our values.
What does the nonprofit investment vehicle that fired its law firm in D.C., what kind of response has come to that?
Well, a lot of publicity. So, while as I say, I think it's fair to say, just an assumption given the size of the law firm, that this will not have been, a top client of that firm's. The publicity around it and the statement that this fund was willing to make about its values and, frankly, its disappointment in the lack of shared values with its law firm has certainly gotten a lot of us talking. And so all the legal press has covered it. A lot of the mainstream press has covered it. So again, I come back to does it matter to your profitability? I can assure you that law firm is definitely regretting that this fund felt the need to do this, because it's not good publicity at a bare minimum, but it will certainly cause their other clients, and indeed it causes us as a completely different law firm, but knowing we have clients who will be reading these things, to think, hey, let's make sure we don't have any risk of not being true to our values, that we can't be called on in the same way.
Powerful example. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to include here that you think should be included when we ask this question? Do values matter now? Anything else that comes to mind?
No, I think we've covered it. Really, again, I think some of our political climate, our the environment in which nobody seems to be quite sure what's true and what's not, makes, this need, I think it is a real desire to be able to to count on these principles, and to count on our businesses to set examples that are, not lip service, that are not alternative facts, but really, demonstrate that ethics, that values are a part of all of our business dealings and everything that we do day in, day out.
Tamara, I think this was great. Was there anything you felt? The very beginning of it had a little tweaking of the sound quality, but I think it's sufficiently good. If there's any problem with it, I'll let you know, and we may want to do that first part over because I thought it was really powerful. So
Sure.
This is great. More to come. By the way, since you're on the phone, what have we? What's happened with this? You were trying to get one of the healthcare companies or one of the first we started with Unilever, and then there was a client of yours that you wanted to see if you could get. What's happened with that?
I think we decided we were going to struggle to get clients engaged in a timely fashion. By the time you get clients involved in who's the right person and get them to, it just wasn't going to work for this one.
Oh,
so I think,
okay. So we'll assume then that we've covered your client base, and I'll see if I need anything else. But I'll finish the last couple I have, and then we'll start the editing process. Okay.
Agreed. I think that makes sense.
What's the date of that meeting that you're having by which you guys wanted to have this? Was May something?
We have, I think it was our partners retreat that we were talking about, which is actually the 27th and 8th of April. So I think that was too soon. Yeah. But
I think I'll make that given the delays we've had. I was so,
exactly.
Okay, darn it, that would have been great. I wonder if we might have sort of a teaser that could be interesting. Let me think about that, if that's of value.
Sure.
But yeah, okay. Well, okay, we're onward. We'll see how good this sounds when we pull it all together. And I might actually use your Enron example.
Sure.
Not with you saying it, but leading into something that you've said elsewhere in the thing. That was good.
That's fine.
This is great.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Perfect.
Really
Thank
well
you.
done. Bye.
Speak soon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.